And don't know where here comes Barry. Barry and Sumner are coming in.
Oh, Barry will have been sorry to, well, I shouldn't say that.
That's all right. Hey, Barry.
Hi.
Just about, I just hit record. So, and then Sumner is coming in here. And okay.
Where is Gabe? We haven't seen Gabe in weeks.
Gabe has been busy working. So
Deborah?
he works off and on for different projects. Okay, so let me, so I apologize for last Friday at the last minute not being able to meet. My father had 2 heart procedures last week. He was supposed to have 1, but ended up needing the second, which was an emergency pacemaker being put in. But thank God he's doing much better. In fact, I think he's better than he was before these procedures. So that's good. But it was hurry up and wait last Friday because I was in the hospital with him and the doctor didn't come to see him until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Every other day that week, they were there by 10 o'clock at the latest. So this time it was at 1 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock he discharged him. So in an hour and a half, we were out of the hospital. And if only that had happened in the morning, it would have been a lot better. But anyway, otherwise the care at Suburban Hospital, top notch, the team, top notch. So God forbid you need anything, Suburban Hospital and Johns Hopkins Medicine, they're really good. So we left off last time on page 215, verse 2 of chapter 32. And let me say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we had read verses 2 through 6, and we had done the commentary up until Nachmanides. So we left off with having to do Nachmanides and then the additional comments on these verses. So let me read the verses in English to remind us, and then we'll get to Nachmanides. May the discourse come down as the rain, my speech distill as the dew, like showers on young growth, like droplets on the grass. For the name of the Lord I proclaim, give glory to our God. The rock, his deeds are perfect, yea, all his ways are just. A faithful God, never false, true and upright is he. Children unworthy of him, that crooked, perverse generation, their baseness has played him false. Do you thus requite the Lord, O dull and witless people? Is not he the Father who created you, fashioned you, and made you endure? Okay, so let's pick up with Nachmanides on this, on the left-hand side of 215. May my discourse come down as the rain. The discourse that he took from the heavens and his speech on earth will drip down on Israel and distill upon them like the dew. Yeah, okay. And then on page 216, for the name of the Lord I proclaim in heaven, give glory to our God on earth. This is addressed to all Israel. The stone that Joshua calls to witness hints at this original earth, from which comes the shepherd, the stone of Israel. From Genesis 49, see my comment there. So there's something mystical there, something powerful about some particular stone here, which is related to the earth here. The same applies to the stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing. That is why Joshua said, see, this very stone shall be a witness against us, for it heard all the words that the Lord spoke to us. See also, mark well this stone which I placed before Joshua, a single stone with 7 eyes. One who is knowledgeable will understand. So there's something about a particular stone that somehow was ingrained with the Torah. And it's kind of like, you know, the stone with the sword in it that only King Arthur could pull out. Something special about this stone, which is some primordial stone that has the power and words of Torah in it. So I know nothing about this, and but it's just interesting that he's relating earth here to the stone in Joshua, to the stone in Genesis, and to this foundation stone that's in Psalms. Okay, so now verse 4 in Nachmanides, the rock, his deeds are perfect. This alludes to the divine aspect of justice. Every deed that comes from it is perfect, whole and complete, never wavering or changing for all eternity. Yea, all his ways are just. There can be nothing lacking in his deeds or his justice, for it is done in full measure by a faithful God. Never false, there is no iniquity in the rock. True and upright is he, the justice is true, and the rock is upright. Children unworthy of him, their baseness has played him false. See the old translation, which translates somewhat more literally, and at least in the same order as the Hebrew. A blemish can be called corruption, for example, for they are mutilated, they have blemish. A curse on the cheat who has an unblemished male in his flock, but for his vow sacrifices a corrupted animal to the Lord. The verse is saying that Israel's blemish has corrupted the rock's people, his inheritance for him. It calls them not his children, just as at a time of favor, it says they are his children. Okay, so trying to add his understanding of corruption here, blemish, to our understanding. That crooked, perverse generation, again, these are the last words in a verse. Crookedness is the opposite of straightness invoked in verse 4, where upright is literally straight. Make crooked all that is straight, from Micah. By the same token, perversity is the opposite of truth. Since he is true and upright and the people are the opposite, they are not his children, but act corruptly from his perspective. The sense of the verse then is as follows. Their blemish has corrupted his children for him, that crooked, perverse generation. That is, the diminishment of their status is not the result of any deed of the rock, for he is perfect and no diminishment can ever occur in him. It was their own blemish that corrupted them before their father. As for not his children, it is better read as his unchildren, as in, I will say to not my people, you are my people. It's an expression comparable to no gods in our verse 21, referring to one who is not a god. See, similarly, your children have forsaken me and sworn by no gods. Or perhaps the verse is saying their blemish has corrupted them for him. They are not his children, but a crooked, perverse generation, the opposite of him. Right, so I guess he's just trying to point out where this corruption is coming from, and that we shouldn't think that God is less corrupt because the people are less corrupt. God is perfect. It's us, the people, who have become tarnished. And he goes on, O dull and witless people. See the comments of Rashi and Ibn Ezra on this phrase. Onkelos, the Aramaic, translates, O people that received the Torah but were not wise with it. Understanding naval, not as dull, but in the sense it is used in Exodus, you will surely wear yourself out. He takes the phrase to refer to Israel as a nation that is tired of observing the Torah, not wise enough to realize that it's good for them forever. He does the same with nation of fools in verse 21, which uses the same word, explaining it as a nation that is fed up with being wise and religious. In my view, the word really means ungrateful, one who pays evil for good, the opposite of one who does a kindness out of the goodness of his heart. No more shall an ingrate be called generous. That is why we read in the story, of Naval, for he is just what his name says. His name means ingrate, and he is an ingrate. David had done him a great favor, guarding all his possessions, and he did not want to compensate him as he deserved, but spurned David's messengers, treating him with disdain. The same applies when God says to Job's friends, now take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. And let Job, my servant, pray for you, for to him I will show favor and not treat you ungratefully, since you have not spoken the truth about me as did my servant Job. Despite their being wrong, they had been defending God's behavior, so if he treated them badly, it would have seemed ungrateful. It may be that Naval here has a sense of nafal, referring to one who has fallen short of proper human behavior. So the phrase would seem to mean this: do you thus requite the Lord for the good things he has done for you, you ungrateful people, lacking the wit to understand that you are doing evil to yourselves, not to God? For as we read in Job, if you sin, what do you do to him? If your transgressions are many, how do you affect him? If you are righteous, what do you give him? What does he receive from your hand? Is not he, God, the Father, who created you? He begot you and raised you, fashioned you, better, made you. The Hebrew verb generally means acquire, but one can acquire something by bringing it forth from non-existence into existence, as he did to you. See, similarly, the Lord created me at the beginning of his course as the first of his works of old, creator of heaven and earth. Made you endure, this is really the word that means fashioned, as did not one form us from both in the womb? It was your rock that fashioned you. All right, so a lot of comment here just about this, the unusual language that we find in these verses. Again, we're reading poetry, which is unusual for the Torah, and so therefore the Hebrew is unusual and hard to understand. Okay, so let's, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Bess.
Naval's name means ungrateful.
That's what Nachmanides is suggesting. Yes.
His parents named him that.
Okay, so stories in the Bible are not necessarily true, and therefore names that are given to people in the Bible are meant to teach a lesson. So the classic example of this is in the book of Ruth. Ruth's husband and Orpah's husband. So Naomi was married to Elkanah. They had 2 sons, Machlon and Chilion, which mean disease and pestilence. Okay, so clearly in that book, nobody would name their children disease and pestilence. You just don't do that. There are lots of unusual names that people name their children, but no one in their right mind would give their child the name disease or pestilence. But in the book of Ruth, it serves a purpose because they die. And then that becomes the whole premise of the book of Ruth, leaving their widows with their mother-in-law, whether they're coming back to Israel or not. Okay, so don't ascribe too much to why a parent would name their child Naval. It's more for the purpose of the story. Yeah.
But I remember growing up, parents would call their children, "Oh, that's my ugly child," or my.
So they're not to tempt the evil eye, not to tempt the evil eye.
Right.
So maybe they did that, but I don't know if that's, why would you go through life with the name Naval? That's not really a good thing to do. Yeah, what's your other question? Oh, I thought you said you had
2, but
okay.
Nachmanides is talking about God as the rock. We are the people of the rock, and God.
Yeah, well, it's in the verse. The verse says the rock.
This is the first time that metaphors come up.
No, I think God is referred to as a rock elsewhere in the Torah, and God has a mighty arm, outstretched arm, and mighty hand. Other things, God is compared to other things in the Torah too. Why? Why are you asking?
I was just thinking Rock of Ages. It just
it comes from this idea that the Rock of Ma'oz Sur that we sing in on Hanukkah. Also, every every morning before the Amidah, there's Sur Yisrael, Kuma Be'ezrat Yisrael, the tune that we sing right before the Amidah starts, Sur Yisrael, Rock of Israel. So it all comes from this and other references in the Bible to God as Rock.
Well, I was struck by the reminder that Moses was punished for striking the rock.
Oh, there you go.
I wonder if there's some metaphoric.
You could do that. Yes. Write a midrash about that. That's yes. that is striking out at God. Yeah, absolutely. You can understand it that way.
Right.
Yeah. So now the additional comments for these verses, very bottom of 215. May my discourse come down as the rain. Each of the four phrases of this verse represents one of the cardinal directions, west, north, south, and east, respectively. Okay. And the four winds cover the entire day. The east wind blows in the morning, the south wind at noon, the west wind in the evening, and the north wind at midnight. So Chizkuni, you'd have to see where Chizkuni lived to see what the weather was like where he was. Let me just see where it says Chizkuni is from France. So where he is in France, maybe the wind blows in different directions over the course of the day. Discourse, literally taking, refers to how easily the Torah takes people toward observing its commandments, in contradistinction to the laws of other nations, which are accepted only under the threat of force. My speech distill as the dew. Speech refers to the stories told in the Torah. Or, following the metaphoric interpretation, the wise will get a steady rain of knowledge from the poem, while the masses will get only superficial dew. Like showers on young growth, like droplets on the grass. See old translation, which demonstrates that the small rain of the first phrase belongs to the masses, and the showers of the second phrase to the wise. For the name of the Lord I proclaim, give glory to our God. This is spoken to the four directions of verse 2 and the heaven and earth of verse 1. The name of the Lord contains three different letters, which can be combined in six different ways, matching the four directions, the heavens and the earth, all of which were created through it. So Yud Hey Vav Hey, right? Three different letters, Yud Hey and Vav, which can be combined in six different ways. Okay, well, I'm not going to play it out right now, but I'll take his word for it. So it's a nice midrash, a mystical thing about the name of God, six different ways to do the letters, six directions showing God's everywhere. His deeds are perfect, as just explained, his work is perfect, that is complete. Yea, all his ways are just. Since the poem describes how Israel and the other nations are to be punished, it first asserts that the punishments are to be completely just. A faithful God, never false. He is faithful to reward the righteous in the world to come, and never false when he punishes them in this world. All right, so that's a sense from a Barbanel about good and evil and God's role in that. True and upright is he, rather charitable and upright. Charitable to those who violate his will, in that he does not exact full punishment from them. Upright to those who do his will, in that he grants them their full reward. Rather, just and right is it, that is his work, as old translation more literally translates, his deeds. Though he created humankind with the capability of sinning, there was no imperfection or injustice in this on his part. Or he is true in rewarding the wicked in this world for their good deeds, and upright when he punishes them in the world to come. Their baseness has played him false. It was their own blemish, not one created by the Lord, so they have no excuse for their sinning. It's the blemish that does the corrupting in this verse, and what it corrupts is the generation. or their blemish was worshiping the golden calf. And then the bottom of 218, O dull and witless people, you are not wise enough to take the long view. Is not he the Father who created you? Rather, who has gotten you or acquired you by bringing you out of the house of bondage? Okay, so we continue with the poem. Let's do 7 through 12. Yeah, 7 through 12. Zachor yamot olam, binu shnot dor vador, she'al avicha v'yagedcha zekenecha v'yomru lach. V'hanchel el yon goyim b'hafrido b'nei adam, yatsev gvulot amim lemispar b'nei Yisrael. Ki chelek Adonai amo, Yaakov chevel nachalato. Yimtsaehu be'eretz midbar, uvetohu yelel yeshimon, yisovevenhu yivonenehu, yitzrenhu ki ishon eno. Kenesher yair kino, al gozalav yerachef, yifros kenafav yikachehu, yisaehu al evrato. Adonai badad yanchenu ve'ein imo el nechar. Remember the days of old, consider the years of ages past. Ask your father, he will inform you. Your elders, they will tell you. When the Most High gave nations their homes and set the divisions of man, he fixed the boundaries of peoples in relation to Israel's numbers. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his own allotment. He found him in a desert region, in an empty, howling waste. He engirded him, watched over him, guarded him as the pupil of his eye. Like an eagle who rouses his nestlings, gliding down to his young, so did he spread his wings and take him, bear him along on his pinions. The Lord alone did guide him, no alien God at his side. Okay, so let's look at Rashi. Remember, so we're on 219 on the left. Remember the days of old, what he did to the earlier ones who put such anger before him. Consider the years of ages past, literally of generation and generation. The generation of Enosh, over whom he caused the waters of ocean to flow. See Rashi's comment to Genesis 6:4. And the generation of the flood, whom he inundated. Or another reading, though you have paid no attention to the days of old, at least consider the years of the many generations to come. For he has the power to do you great good, letting you attain the Messianic era and the world to come. So he just adds this nice midrash about the considering the ages and encouraging us, the poem does, to be righteous, to witness the Messianic era. Ask your father. This refers to the prophets who are called fathers, as when Elisha called out, "O Father, Father, Israel's chariots and horsemen." Your elders, these are the sages, they will tell you what happened in earlier times. When the Most High gave nations their homes, rather their portions, what they had coming to them. When the Holy One gave to those who had angered him, the generation of Enosh and that of the flood, their portion, he swamped and inundated them. And set the divisions of man. When he scattered the generation of the dispersion at the time of the Tower of Babel, it was likewise within his power simply to wipe them off the face of the earth. He fixed the boundaries of peoples. Instead, he did not destroy them, but established them permanently. In relation to Israel's numbers, that is, for the sake of Israel's numbers, the multitudes of Israelites that would one day come forth from the descendants of Shem, and according to the number of the total of Jacob's household who came to Egypt, 70 persons. Thus, he fixed the boundaries of the 70 nations that speak the 70 languages.
So
Yes, go ahead.
I find that this is interesting because what Alter was saying, that this perhaps might have been a more older, more archaic poem, and it references some of those original stories, which also
Yes.
potentially have been considered to be of an older time.
Yes,
So it seems like it's kind of completing the circle and drawing the link back to those old stories.
it could be.
And
Right.
and you know, so even though it may seem out of place here in a funny way, it's sort of ending up where we started in the original stories.
Yes, yes. But the thing is, these so-called original stories, these myth stories, we find them in Midrash, but did the rabbis create these stories, or were they putting in writing stories that had been there through oral tradition? So I don't know from the history of Midrash. So I'm not a Midrash scholar to know, like this story that Rashi is referring to about the generation of Enosh. I don't know if that's a story that preceded or predated the time of the rabbis and just entered into Midrash at that point, or did the rabbis create it? So I really don't know. But yes, but your point in general is right about these origin stories that we should be thinking about through the wording of this poem. Okay, so Rashi goes on with verse 8. When the Most High gave nations, we finished verse 8. Verse 9, page 220 in Rashi. For the Lord's portion is his people. Why did he fix the boundaries of the 70 nations? Because his portion was contained among the nations and would one day come forth. And who is his portion? It is his people. And who is his people? It is Jacob, his own allotment. Jacob was the third of the patriarchs with triple merit: the merit of his father's father, the merit of his father, and his own merit, like a rope made up of 3 strands. He and his sons became his own allotment, but Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and Esau, the son of Isaac, did not. So Rashi has a little anti-Islam bent there. He found him in a desert region. He found them still faithful to him in a desert region, for they accepted his teaching, his kingdom, and his yoke, which neither Ishmael nor Esau did. So neither the Muslims nor the Christians. Okay, so when Rashi refers to Ishmael and Esau, he's referring to Muslims and Christians. It's because Esau is the Roman Empire, which then becomes Christianity. He shone upon them from Seir. He appeared from Mount Paran in an empty, howling waste. A parched and desolate land, a place of jackals and ostriches. Even there, they kept the faith. They did not ask Moses, how can we go out in the wilderness, a parched place of desolation? This is how you followed me in the wilderness is about. He engirded him. He surrounded them with clouds and circled them with military divisions in each of the 4 directions, and surrounded them underneath Mount Sinai when he held the mountain over them like a dome. Okay, again, other old Midrash being connected here to, like you were saying, Barry, just bringing these old stories to show what God did for us over the centuries. Watched over him, he watched over him there with Torah and with understanding. Guarded him from seraph, serpents and scorpions, and from the other nations. As the pupil of his eye, rather the black of the eye from which the light comes forth. But onkelos, the Aramaic, interprets he found him to mean he found him everything he needed in a desert region. For this aspect of find, in a desert region, right? And he engirded him to mean he settled them all around his presence with the tent of meeting in the center of the 4 divisions, 1 on each side. Like an eagle who rouses his nestlings, he led them gently and compassionately, like an eagle who is tender with his children and does not enter the nest suddenly, but flaps and flutters his wings between tree and tree, between bough and bough, to raise his children so that they will have the strength to receive him. The Hebrew literally says nest, but New Translation understands correctly that it refers to the nestlings. Gliding down to his young, he does not simply plop down on them, but hovers, now touching them and now not touching them. So to the Holy One. Shaddai, we did not encounter him impossibly great in power. When he came to give them the Torah, he did not reveal himself to them from a single direction, but from four. Three directions are mentioned, and the Lord came forth from Sinai. He shone upon them from Seir. He appeared from Mount Paran. And God is coming from Teman, gives the fourth. So, kind of a gradual transition in hearing God's word. So did he spread his wings and take him. When the eagle carries his nestlings from place to place, he does not grab them with his claws like other birds. For the other birds fear the eagle, the highest of birds, which flies far above them. So they carry their young below them with their claws in fear of eagles. But the eagle fears nothing but arrows. So he carries his young on his wings, thinking, better for the arrow to pierce me and not my children. So to the Holy One, I bore you on eagle's wings. When the Egyptians pursued them and caught them at the Sea of Reeds, they were shooting arrows and hurling catapult stones at them. So the pillar of cloud shifted from in front of them and took up a place behind them. And it came between the army of the Egyptians and the army of Israel. The Lord alone did guide him. Rather, the Lord guided him alone and secure. No alien God at his side. Not one of the gods of the other nations had the power to demonstrate his strength and fight with them. The sages explain this phrase as a reference to the future. And Onkelos, the Aramaic, also translates it that way. I believe they are words of reproof, which the heavens and the earth are supposed to bear witness to. The song is a testimony that the Israelites will eventually prove faithless and will no longer either remember the things he originally did for them or consider the things he will do for them in the future. So the first half of the verse must refer to the past and the second half to the future. This verse connects back to verse 7, where they are told to remember the days of old and consider the years of generations to come. Okay, so Rashbam on all these verses, back to 219 on the right. Remember the days of old, for he prepared your hereditary portion for you even before you were born. When the Most High gave nations their homes, their hereditary portions, and set the divisions of man after the death of Noah in the time of Abraham, when we are told from these, the maritime nations branched out, each with its language. You will find in that chapter the details of how he fixed the boundaries of peoples, the 12 nations of Canaan, counting Canaan himself and his 11 sons, corresponding to the 12 sons of Jacob. For the boundaries of the land of Canaan, which would eventually belong to Israel, are described precisely in Genesis 10:19. But none of the boundaries of the other nations have their boundaries delineated in this way. In relation to Israel's numbers, I have found the same thing written in the Midrash. Canaan and his sons are also 12. And 220 on the right, he found him, as in to suffice them of Numbers 11, which also literally says to find them. Our phrase means that the Holy One sufficed them. He supplied all their needs. He engirded him with his angels who guarded them. The angel of the Lord camps around those who fear him and rescues them. One who explains it to say that the Israelites were surrounded by clouds is off the mark. The cloud, according to the straightforward sense, did not engird them, but was a pillar that preceded them. The Lord went before them in a pillar of cloud by day to guide them along the way. Guarded him, this is obviously parallel to engirded him at the beginning of the verse, further proving that it has nothing to do with any cloud. As the pupil of his eye, rather as the darkener of his eye, the Holy One guarded Israel as the eyelid guards the eye, the covering of flesh that comes down over the eye to darken it. See Psalm 17 for another example of this expression. The phrase, whoever touches you touches the pupil of his own eye, uses a different word in the Hebrew, which does indeed mean pupil, the part of the eye with which one sees. Who rouses his nestlings, he bestirs his nest moving it from its place in order to carry it on his pinions. I have roused him from the north, and he has come. Behold, I stir up the Medes against them. Moving anything from one place to another can be called bestirring it. The Lord alone, he alone brought them out of Egypt and led them to the land of Israel. Okay, back to Ibn Ezra on 219 in the middle on the right. The days of old, literally of eternity, but here indeed of the past. Ask your father, having been told to remember, if instead you have forgotten what your elders told you, you must ask them. Your elders, this parallels your father in keeping with biblical poetic style. In my view, both father and elders here imply those who understand. They will tell you. The Hebrew omits the understood preposition of tell to you, here just as the English does. For a comparable example, see Jeremiah 10. When the Most High gave nations their homes, the commentators assigned this to the generation of the Tower of Babel, who were scattered over the face of the earth. It was then that the Lord decreed that the land of the 7 nations would belong to Israel. He fixed the boundaries of peoples in relation to Israel's numbers. The land of Canaan would be sufficient for their numbers. With regard to the verb fixed, some take it to be an infinitive or gerund, as in I don't know how to speak, and others take it as an imperfect verb with perfect meaning. Okay. We go on 220 on the right. For the Lord's portion is his people. See also, yes, Bess.
Out of sheer ignorance, who were the 7 nations? The Hittites?
Yes, that's right.
Those
Yes, the Hittites, Girgashites, right.
And
dwarfs, nobody can name them.
versus the 12 nations?
What was right. So Rashi or Rashbam was paralleling the 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel, to 12 other nations who are surrounding the land of Canaan.
But are there 7 or are there 12 that are named?
So there are 7 within the land of Israel, plus another 5 who I don't know which are the other 5.
The Egyptians would.
I don't know. I don't know what the Midrash is referring to by those 12 other nations. I don't know.
Also, real quickly,
Yeah.
the phrase "remember the days of old," is that part of our Yiskar service? Is that?
So
that phrase?
the Yisker service, that's from a psalm. Just a second. Let me find it. Let me pull it up. Let me just see.
The question.
Just a second.
Is that phrase familiar to everybody? Yeah.
Yeah, so it depends on the English prayers we're reading. So in the blue Shabbat Siddur, that's let me get the old one, because you might be remembering it from just a second. Let me see where Yisker is. I don't remember where Yisker is in the old prayer book. 1 second here. There it is.
When I Google remember the days of old, it just gives us this Deuteronomy 32. It doesn't
Right.
say anything else, but that doesn't mean anything. It does mean something.
So Barry, I'm not finding it, and
Does that sound familiar to you, that phrase?
Yes, but it's there's similar phrasing in Psalms. So it's not, so I can't find it right
Okay,
now.
I'm
Sorry.
just curious.
Yeah. Just 1 second here. Okay, so Ibn Ezra continues, right? We're left off at verse 9 on 220. For the Lord's portion is his people. See also these, the Lord your God. Wait, did we read this? No. To other peoples everywhere under heaven, for every portion below has a matching portion on high. Jacob, his own allotment. Our sages say that the likeness of our ancestor Jacob is etched on the throne of glory, a great religious mystery to which this verse testifies. That's what Ibn Ezra suggests, that Yaakov Chevel Nachalato, Jacob, his own allotment, means he has his place on the throne of glory. This is the highest level of distinction. He did not do so for any other nation. The question, do you thus requite the Lord, O dull and witless people, demonstrates how they have fallen from distinction through their witlessness. Is not he the Father who created you? Implies that he created them for his glory, and that he taught them, as the song goes on to say, as a father teaches his son. Allotment, literally rope, really means one's lot. Delightful country has fallen to my lot. The image comes from property measured and marked off by ropes. He found him in a desert region. He, the Father who created you, he found them, or perhaps better, reached them when the glory entered the wilderness with them. They were like someone wandering in a land no man had traversed, where no human being had dwelt. In an empty howling waste, a place where the howling of animals like jackals and ostriches is heard, where anyone who hears the sound is aghast. He girded him. This refers to the protective clouds. Watched over him, rather gave him understanding by means of the Torah. Guarded him from enemies as the pupil of his eye, that is the dark of his eye, as have I already explained in my comment to Proverbs 20. As for saying that the Holy One has an eye, this is an anthropomorphic metaphor. The point is simply that he would guard them from every enemy and ambush. Like an eagle who rouses his nestlings, rather who stirs up his nestlings, moving them from place to place. Gliding down to, rather hovering over them as they fly. A wind from God hovering over the water. The cloud too was over them while they traveled. His young, bring me a turtle dove and a young bird. This is a generic word for the young of birds of any species. So did he spread his wings and take him? The eagle takes each chick separately and puts it on his pinions, for they were not strong enough to fly on their own. This is the straightforward sense. How I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me means something different. It refers to their leaving Egypt defiantly and boldly, and to the speed with which they came to Mount Sinai. Who are these that float like a cloud, like doves to their coats? So that was he's saying that was a metaphor in Exodus 19, not really. The Lord alone did guide him. On a sign from the Lord, they made camp, and on a sign from the Lord, they broke camp. There was no one associated with him in this, but the Hebrew could conceivably mean the Lord did guide him alone, meaning Israel alone. There is a people that dwells apart. No alien God at his side. This would indeed seem to mean rather at Israel's side, by contrast with the later period when they incensed him with alien things. Okay, and Nachmanides on all of this, 219 on the left, in the middle, remember the days of old. See Ibn Ezra's comments about this passage, especially to verse 9. Indeed, a wise man's talk brings him favor. If he is correct, then remember the days of old refers specifically to the 6 days of creation. That is the good that the Holy One did for you during the era of formation. Consider the years of ages past. Consider and understand what was done for you during the generations since the Shekhinah began to dwell among you. And on 220 in the middle, he found him in the desert region. Rashi's comments to this verse do not really fit the context. The text is reproving the Israelites, reminding them of the good of the Lord, the good the Lord did for them, which they repaid with evil. Guarded him as the pupil of his eye, that is, as he would protect his own eye. Or perhaps it's to be taken this way, 221, as one would protect one's eye. Obviously, the image comes from a human eye. There are many examples of this phenomena in the Bible. The Lord alone did guide him. The Lord dwells in Israel, secure and alone. No alien God at his side, whether there was no strange God with him or with him Israel, it is clear that Israel has no governor from among the lesser divinities to guide them or assist them other than the Lord alone. As we saw in verse 9, they are his portion and his allotment. I've already remarked on this in my comments to Leviticus 18. The Sifrei understands our verse in this way. The Holy One said to them, since you have dwelt by yourselves in this world, gaining no benefit whatsoever from the other nations, I, on my part, will settle you by yourselves in the next world, and not one of the other nations will benefit from you in any way. The divine princes, yes, Sumner.
Yeah, you made a reference to other divinities. Is that an admission that there are other gods?
Right. So it depends who you talk to. There are some who suggest that the other gods that nations bow down to, God allows to exist, but God is supreme over all. Okay, so that all other gods of other nations do our God's bidding.
Okay.
So it's not like they have their own separate power independent from the one and only God. It's that they are tools of God to allow God to do what God wants to do in the world and in the universe. All right, so Nachmanides just finishes on 222. The divine princes of the other nations will have no authority to come and rule over you. For these princes, see Daniel 10. Okay, so now the additional comments, the very bottom of 219. Remember the days of old. Almost 6,500 years ago, when the world was created, that's a Barvanel. So a Barvanel. So is that right? Huh.
That's another 1,400 years,
Well, no. So 6,500 years ago.
1,100.
So right now we're in 5782. If we subtract 500 years, just to round it out, it'd be 5,200 years. So Abarvanel is suggesting that the Jewish year in his time was 52 something, and there were 1,300 years before the calendar began. So I don't know how history works for Abarvanel. What happened, or other rabbis before him, what happened in those 1,300 years before the Hebrew calendar began? Like, what is the point in which the Hebrew calendar begins? Is it with the creation of Adam and Eve? Or is it with Noah? Or is it with Abraham? I'm not sure. So almost 60, so you will see what good I intended for the entire human species. Consider the years of ages past. Before Israel was yet in the world, I arranged a place for you. Or rather, the years of many generations, how the generations have lived shorter and shorter lives. These phrases are emphasizing God's role in creation. See how well I treated the subsequent generations who nonetheless corrupted their ways until the time of the flood. Ask your father, he will inform you. Your elders, they will tell you. You did not see the exodus from Egypt, but your fathers did. And if they had died, you still have Joshua and Caleb, the elders of that generation, who can tell you about it. So Barvanel says this poem is written specifically for the people that Moses is talking to. In relation to Israel's numbers, by giving their future land to the 12 sons of Canaan. Genesis 10, 15, 18 lists 11 sons and adds, afterward, the clans of the Canaanites spread out. One of the groups mentioned there split into two, creating the Perizzites, who are not in that list. Since according to Genesis 9, Canaan was to be a slave to Shem, and whatever a slave acquires belongs to his master, the 12 Canaanite groups were holding the land in trust for Israel. That's a nice way of reconciling how we took the land of Israel. It was just being held in trust for us. Though the 12 territories of the nations of Canaan matched the 12 astrological signs, they were in fact also matched to the 12 tribes, for the land that would be allocated to Israel's numbers when they came forth from Egypt was already assigned tribe by tribe to the nations of Canaan, which were therefore not under the control of their various astrological rulers. That's just interesting, adding the signs of the zodiac, the horoscope, whatever, to this. When the Holy One chose you, you were just 70 individuals, yet he already had in his world 70 complete nations. Indeed, as chapter 7 tells us, it's not because you are the most numerous of peoples that the Lord set his heart on you and chose you. For the Lord's portion as his people, Jacob his own allotment, Jacob and his descendants all serve the Holy One, whereas if there is a pious person among the other nations, he does not pass his piety on to his children. He found him in a desert region, rather he, Israel, found him, the Holy One, that is where they discovered his love and care for them. Or the desert is not where he first found them, of course, that was in Egypt, but in contrast to the land of Israel, the earthly region most fit to receive God's providence, the desert is the least fit for it, yet that is exactly where he found it right to give you the Torah.
Jonah,
Yes.
I'm stuck on additional comment, verse 9.
Yeah.
If there is a pious person among the other nations, he does not pass his piety on to his children.
Right. You don't get any merit if you're a non-Jew for the righteousness of your father. Whereas Jews get merit for the righteousness of our fathers or ancestors. Like we're born with certain privileges. We're born with a pass go collect $200 card, as opposed to each generation of non-Jews has to earn it themselves.
Okay.
In an empty howling waste, a howl.
Oh,
Yeah. Yes, Summer?
I'm sorry, I may have missed it. Where does this reference?
And we're reading.
70 other nations.
Oh, well, that's several of the commentaries have been referring to it. And it's part of a tradition that there are 70 nations in the world.
I see.
So it's just the rabbinic understanding that there are 70. So, there are how many member states of the United Nations? 200 something. So, maybe in the time of the rabbis, there were 70, maybe not. I don't know. But it was their way of saying 70 is a big number. So let's make it 70.
Okay.
In an empty howling waste, the additional comments go on. A howl is a cry of pain. A howling waste is one so empty that the winds blow with a sound like a howl. He engirded him, perhaps rather it, the wilderness, surrounded him, or perhaps the Holy One encompassed them with the wilderness. As the pupil of his eye, rather the eyelid. The Hebrew word ishon is related to shena, sleep, when the eyelid covers the eye. Okay, maybe. That is how the Holy One guarded Israel. Or he guarded them, bottom 221, just as he guarded the human eye by means of the physical structures that cover and protect it. The eye is the most important of the senses and also the most in need of protection. Gliding down to his young, rather resting upon his young. The Lord alone did guide him. One who is afraid does not travel alone, but in a caravan. One who is not afraid needs no one to accompany him. Not did guide him, but will give him rest and relaxation. Okay, it's just about 10:30. It's 10:26, so we'll stop here for today. We will meet again next Friday, God willing. So have a Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and a good weekend and a good week to come.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Take care.
everyone.
Shabbat shalom.